For this week class, you're going to complete the anesthetic data worksheet while reviewing Chapter 5. You'll only complete the first 11 boxes for each anesthetic given. You'll complete the rest of the chart next week when reading Chapter 7 on dose calculations. But this will be a nice introduction into all things important to know about the different anesthetics, and we'll touch a little bit on calculations as well. But next week is when the real math begins. Now, it's important to know, understand, and document dosages so that you know how much you can give a patient. Local anesthetics are just like any other drug. They're safe and helpful when used in their appropriate amounts, but if too much is given, then complications and overdoses can arise. So I'm going to show you how to fill out the first half of this form. To follow along, I want you to have your book open to page 61, the start of the prilocaine section. Put a tab on page 93 also, because we're going to be referring to box 7.4 a little bit later. So let's begin. Now there's a lot of information that can be obtained just on the front of the box. Looking at your worksheet, the first column is the proprietary name. This is the brand name. Every box will have the generic name, and then some boxes will also have the proprietary name. So the generic name is listed here, prilocaine hydrochloride, and the brand name here is Cetanest. So I'll fill in the proprietary name in the first box. Now recall from the last lesson last week, in order for the anesthetic to be able to cross tissue barriers, a salt had to be added to it. That's where the hydrochloride comes in. That's the salt that was added to the anesthetic molecule. Now, next is the percentage of drug in the solution. That's always the percentage number next to the name. In this case, 4%. The amount of drug in milligrams per millimeter. We can see here that it is 40 milligrams per millimeter, and that goes here. But how much is that for a whole cartridge? We have to do some math here. Each cartridge, you can see, is 1.8 milliliters. Now, some say 1.7, but whenever you do the math on local anesthetic, you're always going to use the 1.8 as your factor. So in this case, to determine how much drug is in one of these cartridges, you'll have to multiply 40, which is how much is in 1 millimeter, by 1.8, which is how many milliliters is one cartridge. And that is going to give you 72. So 72 milligrams in each cartridge of anesthetic. So now let's move on to vasoconstrictor. Going back to our box, we now want to know if there's any vasoconstrictor here. And yes, we see here that it's epinephrine. So we'll put that in the box. I can just write epi, that's fine. Next, what's the concentration of epinephrine? This is the ratio of vasoconstrictor. In this case, it's 1 to 200,000. So I'll put that here. Now we want to know how many milligrams of vasoconstrictor is in 1 milliliter. For this, we're going to go to our box 7.4 on page 93. This is a table that shows how many milligrams of vasoconstrictor are in 1 milliliter and one cartridge. Before you go to this table, you'll need to remember what vasoconstrictor concentration you're looking for. In this case, we have 1 to 200,000. So at the bottom of this box, we see a list of concentrations, and we find 1 to 100,000 at the bottom. This shows us that there's 0.005 milligrams of vasoconstrictor per milliliter of solution. So we'll fill that box in. But how much is in one cartridge? To calculate that, we multiply 0.005 times, again, the amount of milliliters per cartridge, 1.8, which will equal 0.009. That means that there's 0.009 milligrams of vasoconstrictor, in this case epinephrine, in a 1.8 milliliter cartridge. And we'll put that here. So that's as hard as it gets. It's downhill from here, at least for this week anyway. Let's fill in the rest of our chart. Going back to page 61, the next box to fill in is the duration of anesthesia for soft tissue as well as pulpal. Now, looking at your book, under the duration of action section, under prilocaine, we're not interested in the plain anesthetic because our anesthetic has vasoconstrictor. Plain means that it doesn't have a vasoconstrictor. So go down to where it says 4% prilocaine with 1 to 200,000 epinephrine. You can see under here, it gives you the duration for pulpal and soft tissue anesthesia. So I'll fill in those boxes. It's 180 to 480 for soft tissue. So that actually comes out to be 3 to 8 hours. For pulpal anesthesia, it's 60 to 90 minutes. The last box I want you to fill in for this week is whether or not it's a short, intermediate, or long-acting anesthetic. Again, going to where we found the times for pulpal and soft tissue anesthesia, we see it says intermediate. So it's considered an intermediate anesthetic. So that's it for this week. Finish filling in all the rest of the columns for each of the given anesthetics. If there are two of the same columns, then that means that there are two concentrations of vasoconstrictor. For instance, you'll fill out a column for articaine 1 to 100,000 and articaine 1 to 200,000. When you're finished, go ahead and submit it into Blackboard. If you have any questions, please ask either on the discussion board or shoot me an email. Thanks.